This is Tim Cottrell, and I'm talking to you from Salt Lake City, Utah. Beautiful day in the mountains. Welcome to this webinar. It has to do with recruiting, especially for CPA firms and financial professionals. This is an issue that is important for me. It's something that I've lived and dealt with in my career numerous times. Just to give you some background that you who are attending, I'm sure, are familiar with. There's a saying that I like, and that's the big dog eats first. And that's certainly true with accounting firms. It's harder every day when there's a 1.3% unemployment rate amongst CPAs for small and medium-sized firms to attract the talent that they need to grow. One of the firms that we work with is having to turn down work because they don't have professionals that they can send out on the jobs that are coming to them. And so certainly they are losing revenue because they can't find top talent that can address the work that's available to them. And so the big four firms don't have those problems. They're able to recruit, they're able to adjust their fees more than a medium size or local firm can. That's a dilemma that I have found myself in, and that many of our clients are finding themselves in. What can you do in conditions such as the ones that we're facing today? Whenever we're a search firm. We have been in business for 4 or 5 years, and we're a search firm. And one of the worst experiences that we've had as a search firm is to be asked to find a domestic tax person. It's so hard to find one that fits within the salary level that a small or a medium-sized CPA firm has. And so what can you do? Well, you can carve out a niche, and you specialize in specific industries or services. You focus on your strengths, you provide personalized attention to your clients, you offer competitive pricing, you leverage technology, you emphasize your ability to do things quicker. You just stay within your lane, and you don't try to leave that lane very often. I'd like to talk to you about a strategy that you may not have considered. Maybe you have, and you've thought it's impossible for somebody your size. But I think it's a very powerful strategy. And I'll give you a couple of examples. What I would propose that you could do, and it takes a little bit of time and it takes a lot of commitment, and that is to recruit internationally. Five years ago, it was almost impossible to recruit somebody in Mexico or India without forming an entity and incurring the cost with attorneys forming the entity, incurring the cost with local CPA firms of filing sometimes monthly tax returns, having to have your financial statements audited annually. And so in recent years, especially with COVID, a tool came out or became popular, and that's called an employer of record. An employer of record structure takes advantage of a third party's presence in outside of the US. Let's use Chile as an example. So your EOR partner has a subsidiary in Chile. You hire your best talent in Chile, and your partner keeps track of all of the HR rules and regulations, keeps track of all of the things that you need to provide for your employees there. You oversee those employees, you instruct how they work, but legally, they are part of your partner's structure, and they are that partner's employees. So it's a little bit different than an international PEO, which is a co-employment arrangement, but it has a lot of the same benefits. And so the partner can provide benefits for the employees. You instruct the employees how they're going to work, how they're going to do their work, and yet they're not your employees. You don't have to comply with monthly tax returns. All of these things are brought together by your partner, and all of the compliance in Chile is done by that partner. It really is a seamless process. We have many EOR employees in our EOR structure all over the world, and it really is a seamless approach. It's an approach that hasn't been used by CPA firms or finance people very much. And so I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the experience that I've had of doing this And so the first time I did it was in 1996. And I was a partner in a small CPA firm that was in Texas, and it had an office in Dallas and it had another office in El Paso. We needed people, and many of our clients had a presence across the border in Mexico. And so we decided that there was something in the North American Free Trade Agreement that allowed CPA firms to establish CPA firms in Mexico, and we took advantage of that. We opened an office of our CPA firm in Mexico, and we began to hire people. And we were subject to all of the same things that I mentioned. We had to set up an entity. We were subject to local rules about the provision of audit services, the provision of tax services. We were subject to local laws regarding the employment of the professionals that we used. And it was a very difficult yet rewarding time, because we had access to great bilingual professionals who, with a little bit of training, were able to take their Mexico CPA training and apply it to the preparation of U.S. tax returns and the cooperation in U.S. audits under U.S. generally accepted accounting principles. So in a short amount of time, we increased our presence from 0 to 10 employees. I left that firm shortly after opening that office in Mexico. A client of ours, my partners and I, offered me a job that I took for 1 year, and that turned into 20 years. And so I didn't see the full benefits of that firm, but I'll come back to that in just a second. When I left that CPA firm, I went to work for a multinational company in Mexico, and in their tax department, they had 3 people. And so I set out to create a tax department that was reflective of the global footprint that company had. We opened offices of tax professionals in Bogota, Colombia, in Spain, in the Philippines. We opened offices with tax professionals in Egypt, in the Dominican Republic, and we had a great experience. And let me tell you a little bit about those professionals. After bringing them into the company and making them part of our global tax team, I only lost a couple of people. I ended up having at any given time between 72 and 80 people, and we didn't lose people. They loved the idea of working for a company that had a sophisticated tax team. They loved the idea of working in an opportunity where the other members of the team were spread out. And this is before Zoom, really. We didn't have the capability to video conference for our meetings. It was mostly done on the telephone. Every once in a while, usually once a year, or sometimes once every 2 years, we would get together and have a global meeting of our tax department. But I found that those professionals were extremely professional. They were very loyal to the company that we were all working for. I was the senior vice president of tax. They were very loyal to the mission that we were trying to accomplish, the tax benefits that we had committed to. And it was an amazing experience. So we went from 2 people to 75 people in a short period of time, and they were very high motor, high productivity, amazingly loyal. We did lose people once in a while, but it was usually because they had an offer that was so high that we decided not to match the offer and let them go off on a different opportunity. But just a great experience of forming teams across the world. Recently, I retired from that multinational company, and my team is still mostly in place. I co-founded IsoTalent, the company that I'm in today. I talked to my partners recently from that CPA firm, which was my first experience in setting up an office in Mexico, and I understand that they've sold the firm. And the company, the CPA firm that they sold to, one of the things that made this acquisition so attractive was that they were able to find out about the office that they had in Mexico. And when they bought the company, when they bought the firm, there were approximately 20 employees that were there. And today they have increased the size of that to 75. And their plan is to continue to increase. They've made agreements with the universities there in Mexico, and a certain number of the top graduates of those universities are filing into that CPA firm, and they're teaching them U.S. tax and U.S. auditing right off the bat. They are, to one degree or another, bilingual. It's a great benefit. How great of a benefit could it be? Well, let me give you an idea. In a lot of the EOR recruiting that we do, employer of record recruiting that we do, we are finding that instead of maybe a 3x markup on the wages and the cost of an employee that you can get in a standard small or medium-sized CPA firm, sometimes a little bit more than that, we have found that when you hire somebody in Argentina or in Mexico or in Colombia that's bilingual and that you're funneling work to, you can count on an average of about a 10x billing rate compared to what you're paying them. Now, I would start out by hiring people that are non-client facing, that are to a certain extent bilingual, and especially if you have bilingual talent in your firm today, somebody that can work with your people in Latin America or in the Philippines or wherever immediately. And it's important to keep them included. It's important to for them to feel like they're part of something bigger, that they get the benefits of the regimented, disciplined approach that a lot of multinational companies have. That's the reason that they want to work for a small or medium-sized CPA firm, is because that's better than what they see a lot of times in the CPA firms in the country where they're residing. You know, you may choose to just take one of your existing employees in your firm and substitute that person, or move that person up, promote them, and hire their replacement in Mexico. And you will probably make good money on that first role. But it does require the discipline and the approach that I just discussed. You know, you can do a lot of projects that the client doesn't see. You can have them working together with your team at the same time on projects, and then have your U.S. professionals present those projects to your client. There is some work to do in terms of security, but many of our clients have found that if they just put everything on Amazon Web Services, that their security issues are pretty well met. And so that might be one way that you would choose to address the exchange of information online that you'll have with your employees outside the US. Then what you do is you just move the next position to Mexico, the next position to Colombia, the next position to the Philippines. Some of our clients love having a mixture of Philippines and Latin America because the projects can continue at night while the US employees are asleep. And then when the Philippine counterparts are asleep, the US professionals are presenting the results of those projects or continuing to push them along while those colleagues are asleep. And so, but what we have found is that a lot of our clients really like Latin America. They love the idea of having their colleagues be in similar time zones. They love the ability, especially if they're in Mexico, of having a lot of direct flights up to the US. That works out really well for them to hire somebody in Latin America. So, you know, you hire 2, you hire 3, you hire 4, and pretty soon you've not only decreased your cost of these individuals, you've been able to acquire them from a PwC or a KPMG. You know, since those firms here in the US have been picking off your high potential employees for years, it gives you an opportunity to now get a little bit of revenge and allow us to hire people that have that experience in Mexico or in Colombia or in Argentina. And so you've got great professionals that are bilingual, and now they're fully integrated into what you're doing by the time you have 3 or 4. The Hispanic market in most of the US is the fastest growing market that there is. And so now you've got the cultural awareness and you've got the language so that you can service those clients, and you can start giving these non-US CPAs in their own country, certified in their own country, but giving them the opportunity to present projects to your client in Spanish. And we have found that that has been a great benefit for a lot of our clients that are using EOR services. 40% profit margin could become a 60% profit margin. You have given a lot of opportunities to your team. Some of our clients have actually transferred some of their non-US professionals up to the US and incorporated them into the client-facing aspect of what they do. And we can help you with those visas and the thought process of going through that process and bringing them up to the US. In the beginning, like I said, you would focus those professionals that you recruit on non-client facing projects. It does take a little bit of time, and I want to focus on this. It does take a little bit of time for them to learn US tax compliance. If you have reasonably well organized work papers, it's easy for them to follow what was done last year, but they're not going to be experts in US tax code. They're experts in Mexican tax code, and they know how to prepare a Mexican tax return, but that's not the purpose. The purpose is for them to be able to do the US tax work for your US clients in Colombia or in Argentina or in Peru. It does take a little bit of time, and the fact that you have weekly technical updates and have weekly discussions about some of the changes in the US tax law really helps them. And we've seen that, in a couple of years, especially if you get into a rhythm where eventually you are hiring these individuals directly out of the universities, they will grow up in their career dealing with the US tax code. And that's really helpful. The longer you do it, the better your returns are, the better your employees are. They go out and start recruiting the next generation, and pretty soon you have a virtuous cycle that is paying dividends for your firm. I really am a firm believer in this structure. This is something that we have done for clients. It's something that I've done for my own firm, and it added a lot of value the day that my partners ended up selling the firm. I did it while I was senior vice president of tax in a multinational corporation. I just have nothing but good to say about the quality of the professionals that you can access, about the cost of the professionals that you can access compared to today's cost of CPAs in the US. And it is a fruitful field where you can find talent when there is no talent available in the US. Let me just talk for a second before we open it up for questions, if there are any, to talk about really what the agreement with IsoTalent would look like. So, some of the bigger EOR companies say, find and hire your best talent and we'll employ them for you. At IsoTalent, we've taken a different approach. We like to sit down with you and understand exactly what your goals are, what you would like to achieve. We like to add some of the best practices that we've seen and some of the things that we feel like you can aspire to if you so desire. We like to understand the size of your firm, the makeup and the bilingual or no bilingual capabilities of your firm today. So we like to get an idea of what you would like to do and tell you whether that's reasonable. We will work with you to find the hires that you want to make. So some people say, you know what, I would like to find a highly bilingual person that could be the manager of my operations in Mexico. And after that, I'd like to find non-bilingual people that are CPAs or that are finance professionals that could report to this really bilingual manager that we're going to have in Mexico. They do that because, it may cost $10,000 less in salary every year compared to one that's fully bilingual. And so the strategy or the structure is to find one super bilingual person that would represent a big savings compared to a US comparably compensated and prepared asset. Backfill behind that person with people that are less bilingual and even at a lower level. So we would go through that process with you. We would design the structure of what your team should look like, and then you would sign an agreement with us, and we would start to recruit. And we have a very efficient recruiting process. One of the first things that IsoTalent did when we first started it was to break the traditional recruiting model. We don't charge 25 to 35% of a first year salary. When we do a recruit, we have an hourly model that has a cap on the total fees that we would collect from you. So let's say that we can find a really good tax manager who we think has high potential to be able to learn what he needs to or she needs to about the US tax code, and that can supervise a team. And let's say that that person costs you $45,000 in Mexico. We would cap our fees generally at $8,500, maybe less, depending on some factors that we would discuss with you. And then once we find that person and you take them through the interview process, we would help you to make an offer that is compliant with local law. And we would put that person into our subsidiary, and they would be your employee, but our legal employee. And so we would work together as partners to make sure that that person receives the development that they need, to make sure that they receive all of the benefits that you have planned for that person to be able to receive, and that you're receiving the benefits that you plan to receive when you made the decision to hire. We help you make the decision about whether that person can office out of their own home, or if it makes sense to get a combined workspace, or even to lease a separate standalone workspace. And we've been through that process, and we sign the lease. Our Mexico subsidiary would sign that lease in our name. And then we just charge you for those amounts that would be ongoing rental payments. A lot of times we're able to find offices that are fully equipped. They have computer network installed. They have furniture. We're able to go through that process with you. We like to say that when we help you go into Mexico or find access international markets for your next professionals, that we solve one issue, but we create 20 more. And the issues are, how do they pay for, how do we get them a credit card that they can use to pay for out-of-pocket expenses? How do we get them swag that has the name of the firm, or water bottles or t-shirts or backpacks or whatever that you want them to have to represent your company? What about office space? What about Wi-Fi? What about all these things that they're going to need to be a part of your team? And we can help you through all of those things. And then we charge you a monthly fee. Those fees have been coming down as EOR services have become a lot more commonplace, but we'll just charge you a monthly fee that's aligned with the market. And the difference that we make, that we feel is of value for our customers, is the consultative part of what we do. We've been through it. We've lived it. We know what you have to contemplate when you make the decision, and we know how to be there next to you while you're going through and making those decisions. And so we feel like we offer a lot of value for your monthly payment to us for housing those employees in our subsidiary. So anyway, that's in a nutshell how it works. We've got agreements that we can talk about that you could look at, and we could figure out how we structure this for your firm. That's in a nutshell what I wanted to say. I think it's a great approach for a small, medium-sized firm. One of the questions that I've heard some of our CPAs ask as we brought them in and as they've made a decision is, how small is too small? I have a one-man CPA firm. It's one individual. He's 32 years old, one-man show, and he hired somebody in Colombia. And that person is doing the majority of his bookkeeping work, and they haven't started the Colombian individual professional on anything that has to do with tax returns. But all of the special projects that this CPA does in the U.S., he has this Colombian CPA that's helping him, and so half of his firm is offshore. And that's how he intends to grow until he gets to the point where he needs more client-facing individuals. But this has really magnified his efforts with his own clients. He can give out the assignment to this Colombian CPA, and the Colombian CPA gets the work done, and then he presents it to his clients. So it's magnified his own efforts by at least 100%. So there's no firm size that's too small. All right. Well, let's see if we have any questions come in. This is it's a little bit of a cheesy experience, but it's one that I love to tell because it talks about the power of what this does. non-US employees love the idea of working for your firm. They love the discipline, they love the approach, they love the structure that comes with working in your firm. And I remember one time we hired somebody into our EOR structure, and it was important to our client that on day one we get some swag to this new employee. They wanted them to get, several t-shirts and a polo shirt and a couple of water bottles and a backpack that had their logo on it. And so we made sure that that happened. We got it all sent down to Mexico. And when they accepted the offer, we presented the swag. And this employee started crying. They felt so touched by that thoughtfulness of the employer, and how enthusiastic they were to have this new professional in Mexico as part of their team, that they started crying. And that relationship continues to this day. That person is still in that firm, and it's been a great experience for the firm, and it's been a great experience for the professional. They love the opportunity to practice their English. Most of them have not had a lot of formal training in English, and so even though they speak well, there is some polishing that needs to be done. I'll give you a funny example of that. A friend of mine learned English, and I was talking to him, and I said, "David, you speak English impeccably well." He had a little bit of an accent, and I said, "How did you learn it? Because I know that you didn't study it that much in school." And David said, "Well, when I was growing up, I would just listen to the Beatles, and that's how I learned English." And then he said to me, "Yesterday, all my problems seemed so far away. Now it looks as though they're here to stay." So he really, if he could tie into a lyric from the Beatles, he felt a lot more comfortable about his conversation, and he even had a little bit of a Paul McCartney accent. That's how much he had learned his English from the Beatles. So there are just all kinds of fun stories like that. A lot of them learned English from watching Seinfeld reruns or Friends. And so it's funny to see some of the sayings and vocabulary that they have. But it will take a little bit of time for them to learn some of the business vocabulary and the accounting vocabulary. But it is a powerful tool. They learn it fast. When I moved to Mexico, when I became the head of tax for this multinational company, it was actually a company that was headquartered in Mexico. And so I spoke good Spanish, but I didn't speak with all of the vocabulary that I learned after living in Mexico for 20 years, which included, a more social vocabulary, a business vocabulary, a finance vocabulary, a political vocabulary. All of these things that we kind of take for granted, they're separate vocabularies that a person has to kind of get used to and grow into. And so that happens as you hire these individuals and incorporate them into your teams. Well, it doesn't look like we've had any questions. I hope that what we've talked about today has been helpful, and we would love to talk to you. My email address is tim@isotalent.com. If you want to send me an email, or if you just want to look at our website and connect with us through the standard channels there, or just send me an email at tim@isotalent.com. I'll get back to you immediately, and we look forward to talking to you about growing your firm through the EOR structure. Thank you so much.